All right, welcome everyone to this Marketing for Projectors class. For those that don't know me, my name is Dani Gardner, and I'm here with my co-host Stephanie from the Awaken Business. Welcome, Stephanie. Do you want to just say hi so people know who you are?
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here in a gathering of such amazing beings, including a bunch of projectors, some of my favorite people. I am a projector in human design myself, and also a business and unmarketing coach who works with primarily coaches and healers and change-making entrepreneurs to really help them bring a lightness and sense of play and joy to the work that they do and the impact that they're creating. So this is something I've wanted to do for a couple of years, and I'm really excited to be here with Dani. Finally, I found someone I knew there was someone to do this with me, and there she was. So that's why I'm here, and it's a pleasure.
And what's kind of interesting about how this came about for all of you projectors is that Stephanie actually invited me into doing this. So you might want to ask her about that and how that worked for her. So just a quick little overview for me, for those who end up coming here and don't know me from a bar of soap. I started working with my human design about, I want to say 5 years ago. It might be a bit longer, but let's say 2007. So I'm a human design generator with a 2-4 profile. And what's happened over the years is more and more projectors have come into my orbit because they really appreciate and are drawn to this idea of quiet marketing, going at a slower pace, doing things differently than, much like what Stephanie's doing as well, and sort of creating our own rules and going, I don't have to do all of those strategies that I keep being told that I must do to be successful. So what I'm going to do is just give you a bit of a flight plan for today, and then I'm going to hand over to Stephanie for an introduction. So let's see. There are three. We've categorized what we're covering today into 3 topics. So the first is the projector strategy. So waiting for the invitation. The next is business owner self-care as a projector, and that topic's pretty interesting as well. It includes things like getting support and not doing everything on your own. And then marketing as a projector. So really, this is very much about what the heck do you do while you're waiting to respond? And the very short answer is you don't sit on your hands. So we're going to cover what you actually do. So then along the way, there's a couple of little activities to help sort of integrate what we're talking about here. And then as we go, if there happens to be anything that is not clear, please speak up, and you're free to unmute yourself. Otherwise, we will sort of cover the everything, and then we'll have more of an open discussion at the end once we've got everything sort of laid out. What else? I think that was it from me. So Steph, I'm just going to hand over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dani. So why are we really here today, right? What I see, and not just with projectors, but in particular with projectors, is that there are many people who are drawn to people like myself, people like Dani, because the way of hustling and forcing and pushing in business that is typically put out there, the way of constantly making things happen, doesn't feel good. In particular, a lot of the marketing strategies. And there's a whole other way of being in business that's possible. And there's a way that comes from honoring your design in the way that we're actually made. And that's what I love about human design. So I've got to put in a little disclosure here. I have been, I think I first came across human design maybe a little over 4 years ago and hated it immediately, hated it. It was way too complicated for me. And then I found out I was this thing called a projector who's supposed to wait for the invitation. I was like, what? I have been hustling my butt off in business for decades, and you're telling me now that I'm not supposed to do that? But there was something about this waiting for the invitation that felt right. because I'd always said I'm like a vampire. You have to invite me in. And I think it was because it just naturally happened that I saw that my energy is such that it's very intense if it's not invited. And so it made sense to me. And I couldn't get rid of it. And I actually worked with a coach who was also a projector, who modeled for me. He's like, the less you do, the invitations will start coming. I was like, yeah, right. Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. But that's what I want to encourage you to just start experimenting. You don't have to learn this stuff. You don't have to memorize anything. You don't even have to take notes. Just relax and listen and allow that inner guidance that you have to whisper in your ear about the things that are going to be useful for you. And this is not about getting it all right. Human design is an experiment. It's about testing things out for yourself. And it's about seeing how this is for you, what it means for you to be a projector, what it means for you to wait for the invitation. And to do that, all you have to do is just start bringing some awareness to what you're already doing. And as you do that, and as you begin to attend to what we'll talk about in a little bit, your inner authority, which is how you know what you know, you will gradually start to find your way, because that's how we're designed. It's actually our nature. We're coming back to what's natural and just dropping all of the thinking and the conditioning that we may have had from society about the way things are supposed to be. We're coming back to what is. So this is actually going to be easier than you think, strangely enough. So if all you came away with was just giving yourself permission to slow down to the pace of life in your business, attending a little bit more to that inner authority, to your inner wisdom, and just beginning your own experiment with it and noticing if that's all that you did, even one of those things, it will change the way you do business. So that's kind of the frame I want to put around this. Like, just have fun with it and let it come easily. Oh, you forgot to unmute yourself, my dear.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was just saying I loved that. And it feels so reassuring to hear all of those things that you said. So thank you. Before we carry on, I just want to acknowledge the Australians in the room, because I know it's like early hours of the morning. So hello, Dominic and Katia, and anyone else who's up at crazy time. Yeah. Thanks for making it. I certainly didn't expect you ladies to actually be here. I thought you'd listen to the recording, but thank you. Okay, so let's open the door to part one of this conversation, which is your strategy of waiting for the invitation. And I guess to sort of kick things off, a few notes we've got here is, what does it mean to wait for the invitation? How do you know when you've been invited? How do you know which invitations to accept and which ones to decline? So there's some of the basic things we're going to be covering. So kick us off, Stephanie. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, what does it mean to wait for the invitation? So here's what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean doing nothing for the rest of your life. That would be kind of silly and it wouldn't be very fun. And it certainly doesn't mean initiating, which is primarily what I think we're taught in business. It doesn't mean going out and making things happen relentlessly and pushing doors open and making people pay attention to you. Even just the energy of using those phrases, it's rather constrictive for me, maybe for you too. So waiting for the invitation, as I've been experiencing it, there are two pieces of it and they kind of come together, right? So, and please take this with a grain of salt, because I'm not fanatical about applying human design. In fact, I have tested this relentlessly. Anytime somebody says I'm supposed to do something, I'm like, really? I'm not exactly a rebel, but I'm definitely going to question. So I'm like, what does it mean? I'm feeling moved to share this now. So I did an experiment, I think it was about 2.5 years ago. I called it my projector marketing experiment. I said, okay, I want to test this thing out. Let me see what I can see. So I took a month and I said, for each week, I'm going to follow a different strategy according to my understanding of it. The first week, I'm going to be a generator. I'm going to just do, make all these calls and invitations and see how that feels. The second week, I'm going to be a projector. I'm going to wait for the invitation and only respond to invitations. The third week, I'm going to do neither of those things. I'm just going to tell stories because I really like telling stories. And that's what I did. And the fourth week, I was doing what I described as intuitive marketing. So doing whatever occurred to me. If it occurred to me to act like a generator, I was going to act like a generator. If it occurred to me to do nothing, I was going to do nothing. If it occurred to me to tell a story or share something like that, that's what I would do. And so I was kind of thinking that one of those four was going to be the thing, right? Like it was going to hit home with me and I was going to finally understand what it meant. But what I actually discovered was I started paying attention to where I was moved to do something, when it felt like there was an invitation for me, and when it felt like I was pushing and forcing. And, my generator week wasn't horrible, but it felt more on the forcing side, right? My projector week was, I can't even remember specifically now. I made notes on this. I've done blog posts on it. I should share them with you guys so that you can see it if you want. It felt more aligned, but I didn't have a lot of spark as I remember it. The storytelling week, oh my goodness, I had so much fun. I just wrote stories and shared them every day, and it had nothing to do with my business, and it was great fun. But I think it was the intuitive marketing week where I really just took all those rules away and let myself notice what was moving and happening in me. And this is what I see as waiting for the invitation. First and foremost, it's energetic. So sometimes the application in human design, so you can test this out for yourself, but there's something that happens. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of something's inviting me to move. I have some rowdy dogs in the background, so we'll hope they quiet down. And I notice when that's not happening. And so it seems to me that that's always there. There's always an invitation to something when I slow down enough from within. It's like this combination of an invitation that's drawing me forward and something inside of me that's actually receiving it and reading it. So one of the things that Dani and I talked about, and we're really on the same page when we were exploring how to communicate about what we've seen and waiting for the invitation, is that you don't need an invitation to live your life, to do what you love, and to express yourself. You get to share your point of view. And actually, as a projector, it is one of your greatest gifts to the world. It's what you see. So projectors, as described by human design, are designed with a very penetrating energy. This is why, and it's been my experience, that it can feel really intense for someone if it's not invited, because it's designed to actually penetrate someone's aura and region, that if somebody was doing that to you, like coming into your aura, we're just using this as a metaphor, and telling you what to do with your life, and you hadn't invited them, be like, excuse me, it's invasive, right? So this is why in a one-on-one situation, that invitation, I believe, I've found for a projector, it's very, very important to tune into. Now, when you're talking about sharing your art, sharing your writing, many projectors I find are brilliant communicators and they have something to say. Sharing your point of view, it's not invasive. It's not coming into someone's space. You can actually take the insights that you have and share them without being pushy and bossy, which is often what we as projectors get accused of and probably are guilty of. I certainly was. I was the bossiest little girl. Oh my goodness, especially to my brother. I come from a family of projectors, by the way. My brother, my mother, my sister, myself, all projectors. Didn't know it growing up. So waiting for the invitation is doing you, being you, living your life, and sharing your point of view. And when you do that, I find often in communities, the right people will step forward. So projectors' energy is very specifically magnetic for a group of people they're here to serve, not for everyone, but the ones who are right. And as you're thinking about this, does anyone recognize or notice the feeling of recognition when someone sees you and goes, oh, who are you? They're drawn to you. Yeah, some heads nodding. It happens very naturally. And that's what I'm talking about. When you're being you, just living your life, people will be drawn to you. You just have to blossom like the flower, and the right insects and bees and the wind will come, and just being you is how you get what you need. So that's what waiting for the invitation looks like, in my not so humble opinion.
So Stephanie, a few things it would be good to hear from you about. You can hear me okay? Looks like Stephanie's frozen to me. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. I might just carry on. Maybe we lost Stephanie for a moment. So what I was going to ask Stephanie about is this idea. Oh, are you back, Stephanie?
I am.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
cool.
what happened there, but yes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, what I was going to ask you is to hear from you about, what's your approach from disengaging from the initiating energy? I've got my own approach that I often share. But yeah, any practical or anything that you can think of to share about how do you actually disengage? Because that's, especially in online business, that's what we're mostly doing. We just get caught up in the initiate. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to, you know. So, what are your thoughts on that part?
Well, first of all, this is an experiment that you've got to do for yourself. What it comes down to, it feels in your body. So does it feel constricted and tight, or does it feel open and expansive? So if it feels open and expansive, that to me is the feeling of an invitation. And if it feels constrictive and tight, it's coming from that place of forcing. It doesn't mean you can't do it, by the way. In fact, I'd encourage you to do both. Do whatever occurs to you and just notice how you're feeling while you're doing it. Because when I'm feeling this way, and it feels good to do things when I'm feeling this way. So the way to disengage is to just stop and notice what's happening inside of you, and kind of stop looking to the outside and stop looking to your thinking to explain this. Does that help, Dani? Because it's kind of do I need to be more clear about that?
Yeah, no, that's cool. Let me share a little practice that I love, because I do normally share this with generators, because there are a lot of things that generators and projectors share, and one of them is they got to stop freaking initiating, right? And so if you can actually just stop initiating, I believe that is like a really big step forward, and a lot of things can happen. So something very practical that I came about is this idea of leaning back. So what I started to do, and if everyone notices, maybe right now, if you feel your body, and if you kind of just, where is it? Like if you kind of like go forward and back for a moment, just sort of where were you anchored? Where were you a little bit forward? Were you a little bit back? Like, where were you? And then even just to find your center right now in your seat, and then ever so slightly lean back into the chair. I find that really helps in client sessions, in just your everyday work, in conversations with people. If you just sort of ever so slightly lean back, it disengages the initiating. It stops the forcing the outcome, the, you know, anything like that. So that's one little practice that I find is just so helpful day to day. So doesn't look like you want to say anything about that, Stephanie, but there was something else here on this topic before we move on. You've kind of covered it, but there were a few people who were saying, you know, how do you know which invitations to accept and which ones to decline? And so you've kind of been touching on that, but maybe speak to that. And also I've got this little note about saying no and being less accessible. I thought that was really interesting. So what do you get to say?
So we'll hope that my internet is going to hold on here, because for some reason it seems to be cutting in and out. So I apologize if that happens. And it looks like it may have happened. Okay, so we'll just keep going.
Yeah, you've a little bit
something
frozen.
Called your inner.
Yeah, keep going, Stephanie. Your audio kind of leveled out. So even if the video didn't, so yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll keep going. So there's something called inner authority, and this is how you know which invitations to accept and which to reject. So your inner authority, in contrast to what we're taught, we grow up with using our minds typically, and we use our minds and our thinking and logic in order to determine what we should do, right? This is about going within to this sense of knowing. So there are 7 different types of inner authorities in human design, which can get kind of complicated. 2 of them wouldn't apply to a projector, and those are the sacral, which is only for generators or manifesting generators, and the lunar inner authority, which is for reflectors, who are amazing beings in themselves. They actually have no inner authority, and they have to wait a lunar cycle, according to human design. But the other 5 types, even if you don't know what they are, there's a shortcut that you can use in order to test them out for yourself. So I'll give a little bit of I think it's worth talking about the emotional inner authority, because 50% of the population, there are both generator types as well as projectors and manifestors who have an emotional inner authority. And what this means is that there's an emotional cycle that you need to ride out before you know what you know. And this can be tricky for emotional inner authority beings like myself. So I'm speaking from personal experience, and this is also from my own personal exploration and conversations with clients, is that it can be very confusing to distinguish between how you feel emotionally and what you know to do. But they're quite different. So your emotions are constantly changing. And for someone with an emotional inner authority, there is a cycle of emotions. You're going to go through all the emotions about something before you come to know what you know. So for me, I get very excited. Like if someone's coming to me with an idea, I'm going to get really excited and inspired. And then I'm going to go, well, wait a minute, do I actually want to do this? And then I'm like, no, I don't want to do this at all. And then I'm going to come around to when I settle is when I know. So for someone with an emotional inner authority, you only ever feel emotionally about 80% certain about anything. And at first, that sounds really depressing, but that doesn't mean that I don't have a clear knowing. And I'll give you a specific example from my life. So 3 years ago, apologies for dog. 3 years ago, I knew, actually it was 4 years ago, I knew that I was leaving my marriage to a man who I really loved. And I thought, I don't have a good enough reason for this. I had so many emotions about it. I was feeling fear and loneliness and uncertainty and confusion and inspiration, all of these feelings, right? The knowing didn't change. The emotions changed constantly, but the knowing was there. So that's the difference between your inner knowing and the way that you're feeling emotionally. The emotions never tell you it's that knowing inside. So a quick nod to the other 4 inner authorities. Splenic is in the moment. It's almost like it's an in the moment knowing that it's rooted to the survival. So it often expresses as fear, which can be a little confusing again for people, right? Because it's the sensation of fear, but it's not necessarily the emotion of fear. And then there's self-projected, mental or emotional, and ego. So these often, for those types, it's often useful to have a dialogue with someone you trust so that you can hear yourself express things, and then your clarity will come. For someone with an emotional inner authority, you want to wait longer, right? So rather than, and this was my experiment with that, I used to feel obligated to respond immediately with an answer whenever anyone asked me anything. And experimenting with my emotional inner authority, I just said, okay, well, from now on, I'm just going to give myself 24 hours before choosing anything. Other than, obviously, I'm not talking about like what I'm going to eat for breakfast or lunch, but just give it some space. So this is actually the best way to experiment with how you know what you know. And not engaging is just to give yourself more space than you normally would, more time than you normally would. Slow it down enough for you to start to notice what's actually happening in you. So you wait until you're settled, and then you know. So we can practice that right now. Is this a good time to go ahead and do that, Dani? Yes.
Sorry. Yeah,
Thumbs up.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I want you to do is think about a question you'd like to ask of yourself that has a yes or no answer. So it might be something like, should I, so I did this one actually live a couple months ago. Should I stop using social media for my business? Should I work with this particular client? Would it be, and you can ask the question however it feels good to you. Sometimes I like to ask, is it for the highest good of all concerned if I hire this person to help me? So come up with a yes or no question that you'd like to ask, and you can jot it down if you need to, but just bring it to mind and give you a moment. And it can be very, very simple. It can be even, would this be healthy for me to eat right now? Anything. That's the yes or no answer question. Does everyone have one, or do you need more time? Okay, cool. So bringing that, with that question in mind, just come into your body, which is get present and notice yourself, notice your breathing. So with that question in mind, ask it of yourself and notice what you get. Do you get a yes, a no, or I don't know? And every time I've done this with clients in session, they always know one of those 3 things. Because the truth is that we always know in this moment everything we need to know. And I don't know is a valid response, because sometimes we're waiting for information, or the timing isn't right, or we're waiting for the invitation from another person or the universe. And yes and no are pretty clear.
Mm. I'm wondering if anyone's interested in popping in the chat what their response was, whether it was yes, no, maybe.
Yeah. And if your answer that you get is I don't know, you don't have to figure it out. Everything will come to you in its time. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, an energy dropout that seems like a no. Yeah, that's interesting. And that's important to, yeah, Faraz got a yes. It's important to notice like what that feels like for you. And that's why even just attending to the ask ourselves, we just go into our thinking about it and trying to figure it out and trying to find it instead of being with what we know in this moment. And often for me, if I'm feeling confused, having a conversation with someone who's like a coach or a friend who doesn't try to influence me and just listens, someone who listens can be a beautiful way to help you become more present. And you can also do it on your own. That's your shortcut to your inner authority in any given moment. And then add that on to, if you happen to have an emotional inner authority, give yourself more space so that all the emotions can be felt. And then notice when you get clear. Then that could take 24 hours, that might take 72, that might take longer. It has its own timing, but the same is true for every type.
All right. So we'll just take a little pause because we're going to kind of transition to the next topic. So just take a minute to note down anything you want to note down. And Stephanie, I thought we might just pop down to the third topic, and I can kick that off, give you a bit of a breather.
Cool.
And yeah, and then we'll circle back around to the second one. All right. So let's now talk about marketing as a projector and essentially what to do while you're waiting, which, you know, a lot of, whenever I've asked projectors what they want help with, or when, you know, when you're registering for the class, this comes up a lot. It's like, what the heck do I do? How am I ever going to get clients if I sit around waiting for an invitation? And also related to this is just the exhaustion that people feel about being visible, right? So some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but I just thought this would be a really good opportunity to talk about visibility versus discoverability. So visibility is what we all see around there. You know, you've got to be more visible. You've got to be on all the platforms. You've got to be in all the groups. You've got to show up everywhere all the time on all the channels and all of that. Visibility is that outward, I'm here, I'm over here, you know, it's that, well, it's got a very much an initiating energy to it as well. It's like, it requires effort, right? Usually to be visible. Discoverability, on the other hand, is a more passive, more leaned back approach to actually having a presence in the marketplace and actually being found. So what I see a lot of is people they're channeling their energy into, even though they don't want to be doing this, into social media, right? And into group communities that they're in and things like that. And that's all well and good, but it doesn't tend, it's not a very sustainable approach, and it doesn't really lead to discoverability, right? So then what does? What does lead to discoverability? Okay, so in my experience, and I'm sure you've got some examples as well, Stephanie, how it's happened with me is initially through writing. Doesn't have to be writing though, I just want to say. I know some people are like, oh, I'm not good at writing. It can be video as well. But, you know, in my first real sort of success with being very discoverable without doing any intentional SEO, it was because I simply shared my experience, and it was human design related. So it was like what I was learning about applying the generator strategy to business. Okay. And at the time, I didn't have any human design offering. I was just sharing my knowledge, right? And also sharing my thoughts, sharing my opinion. Okay. Now it was some months later that I happened to realize that particular blog was getting a lot of organic traffic. And I was like, far out, man, that's incredible, you know? And then it kept me wondering, what can I offer these people, you know? And I kept watching the traffic go up and up and up. And then eventually I was like, oh, I know, okay, I'm going to do a live class to my existing audience. And then I'm going to offer the recording on that, you know, link it to the blog basically. And, you know, I just charge $50 for it, right? And yeah, after within a few weeks, people started buying that. And then within a few months, I was getting 10 sales just regularly a month without doing anything, right? So it was about $500. And I'm like, I mean, this is all right. This is nice. It wasn't until a year later that I decided to kind of develop that. Truth be known, I couldn't promote that recording because I'm so strong now in this idea of digestibility. And I think if you are live, it's digestible. If you're not live, it's not digestible. That's just a belief I have, because it's really hard to sit down and watch a 90-minute or, you know, two times a 90-minute recordings. So I couldn't bring it in me to promote that actual recording, or I think I was calling it a course. So I eventually made it into a proper tiny course. I'm very proud of it now. Still sells on its own, but now it's $200. What happened after that is I started to go, hold on a minute. Why did that blog go so well without me hardly doing anything? And so when I reverse engineered what happened, I could see that there was, it was certainly definitely for the most part in the name of the blog. The blog itself, I can't say it was a fantastic blog. It was pretty simple, right? I have edited it over the years, so it's probably got better, you know, but nothing special content-wise. So really it came down to the name. And so why was it that it kept being picked up? It was just because it was very specific without even thinking about it. So it had, so one part, I've got a slide for this. Hold on, let me just, is it up here? I don't remember how I term this. Yeah, okay. So maybe I'll show you this actually. It might be just helpful to visualize this. Let's see if we can do this. All right, I won't try and present, it might take too long. But anyway, so what I worked out is that there were kind of two parts to this name that was making it successful. In this case, I'm just going to call it modality. So in other words, the modality can be a protocol, a tool, a process, a philosophy, a system, right? The other part of it was a noun. So a word that identifies a person, a place, or a thing. So if we have a look at some examples, here's some examples of modalities, tools, or whatever: astrology, NLP, Enneagram, Akashic Records, German New Medicine, human design. Then we've got the nouns, remember person, place, or thing. So business planning, health issue, crossroads, separation, shoulder pain, projectors in business. Now you can crisscross any of these and come up with a really kind of concise name that people are probably going to end up searching for, if you get what I mean, right? But let's have a look at some examples. So, you know, I just thought I'll just make up some, you know, pretend blog names basically. So I've got an insight on grief from the Akashic Records, how I healed my gut using German New Medicine, navigating a crossroads. So that could be, you could put career crossroads, relationship crossroads, whatever, using the Enneagram. Easing the pain of separation with NLP, growing your business as a human design generator, that was the title of the one that that continues to go well. So the onward effect of this, right, meant that people who do that course find my other courses, right? So I get this sort of roll-on effect. So that's one thing. The other thing that caused me to kind of work out that little very simple kind of explanation, I'm like, I get what's happening. All right, I'm going to do this again. So I was like, this time I did a video, but I actually did a video and a blog. And I kind of did it along the same way. And within 3 months, people started joining my list, because in this case, it was, well, I did a video and a blog at the same time. So it's, but the video is very highly ranked very quickly, right? Interestingly, the video was placed both on Facebook and YouTube. And if you typed in the basic words that brought it up, it was the Facebook video that was prioritized that came up, which was really, really quite interesting. So just wanted to give you that little example, because you might have content out there already. Well, I guess the whole idea about discoverability, have content out there that's publicly accessible. Don't have it locked up inside of a Facebook group, or in Facebook itself either, because a lot of people aren't using, maybe people like us sort of are not using Facebook. Don't have it tied up with an opt-in, a free opt-in. Just have it out there, right? That people can actually access, no strings attached. And yeah, so you might have things, you might have videos on YouTube, you might have something out there that you might just change the name of it. And you could have a lot more people find you, right? While you're resting. Wouldn't that be nice? So, anything you would like to share, Stephanie, on discoverability?
Yes, I think I have had the same experience. In fact, the same experience around human design, which is part of what has led both of us here. I saw an opportunity years ago when I was just naturally blogging about my experience as a projector doing marketing, my projector marketing experiment. I shared it on Facebook, and a bunch of people came out of the woodwork, they were interested in it. And then I started to notice that my blog post ranked. And so I was like, well, I only have scratched the surface here of what I know. I was talking about my experience. Like, I've worked with clients and I have friends who are projectors and business partners who are projectors, right? Like, let me put what I know into a larger piece. And so it's like I think it's almost like a 2,000 or 3,000 word piece. And I actually did it for non-energy types in human design. So it's projectors, reflectors, and manifestors. And that is the most trafficked page on my website. Now, I don't do a lot with human design, but I wanted to do something with it. So that's one example of it. I had a previous business where, so the key here is, like, if you listen to Dani, she got really curious. She was really curious about, what's happening here? What if I did this, right? That's one of the ways, through inspiration, curiosity, wonder, exploration, that your inner guidance talks to you. That's what it feels like. That, to me, is an invitation. That's what the energy of an invitation feels like. And it comes from things that are happening in the world, but it's also you responding inside of it. And so it's going to look different for you than it does for me or for Dani. But I was doing the same thing. Like, I'm interested in this legitimately. It wasn't just a strategy that I said, I'm going to put these keywords together. Actually, there's a randomness about it, but it comes from what I'm actually interested in. Other examples for me of how people have been discovering me. I started talking about this thing I call unmarketing last year. And it's just something I made up to talk about throwing out all your ideas about marketing. And I started talking about stop marketing your business, right? So this is exactly what Dani's pointing to. This is a point of view. This is a contrarian point of view, that you can do things differently. And man, did people start paying attention to that. And then I talked about, what if you don't have to do social media for your business? More people coming out, like, they're really interested in this, signing up for my email list. And this happened to be from sharing things on Facebook and in some groups, but also in my personal profile. So it doesn't exactly match what Dani's talking about, but the idea is that I have something that's legitimately interesting to me, and I'm sharing it in various places. Now you can do that strategically, like Dani's talking about. You can do that by placing a blog post on your website so that it's available in the searches. And if you use just smart keyword phrases, here's what to do. Think about what's happening in your life or the lives of the people you help, the problems that you have or the challenges and problems that they have. And what would someone type into the search engines if they were looking for that information? So it's the same thing Dani was saying about taking those two, the modality and the noun, but it's just a different way of thinking about it. So for example, a lot of, let's see, my clients are looking for perhaps like alternative marketing strategies or marketing that doesn't feel icky, or they're like, why do I hate marketing, right? So if I write something around those topics and I title it in that way, you don't have to know SEO to do this, or I put a headline on it if I'm sharing it on social media that you get attention. And it's very likely to be recognized, which is what we want as projectors, right? By people who are looking for that thing. And it's so natural to do because it's what's already happening in your own life, and you can draw from that. And being discoverable is making it easy for people to find that content. So I'm a big fan of creating assets that you can use again and again. Like Dani's saying, they can be working for you while you're resting. So that means on your website where it's searchable, if you have a podcast, if you do YouTube videos, they are searchable, which means they come up in Google and the other search engines when people are looking for them. Pinterest is great for this. Now, Instagram is not, because it doesn't get indexed, but Pinterest gives you actual real estate on those pins, and they rank in Google. So you can do that if you do a beautiful Pinterest board once and it's titled around some of these things we're talking about, something specific, you can get traction off of that. You can have people finding you. You can become discoverable very naturally. And it's not to say that you can't be discoverable on Instagram. Absolutely, you can. It's just a little bit, it works differently. I love having assets of my own that are publicly available. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me. It's more on the theme, and follow your own inclinations. If there's an idea you've been having, like, well, I wonder if that would be interesting to try that. I suggest that you take steps towards it. That is creating from what's inside of you. Do you need an invitation to it? Now, Dani makes the distinction before you sell it, right? Before you create something to sell. Do you want to talk about that, Dani? Because I think that was really good.
Sorry, can you just say that again? What do I do?
Yeah, sorry, that came. I was just like, oh, Dani, this is for you. So there's creating and sharing your point of view, however that is for you, sharing your art. It might be writing, it might be sharing content, a video. And then there's creating a program or a service or a product around it.
I know where you're going. Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we've the first bit we've kind of touched on, but let me just sort of really run this home. You are free and very much should do your art, do you create anything that you are inspired to create, and you can do that without any kind of invitation, as long as it doesn't require anyone to do anything, right? It doesn't require anyone's participation. You can do it. You can do your art. You can, in fact, I've got a really good example I'll share in a moment of just how I invited someone into a collaboration just because she was just sharing, what she just wanted to share. However, if you're creating, whether it be a free or a paid offering, that you can't reverse engineer back and kind of go, there was some kind of an invitation there, either a direct or indirect invitation, then that would be very incorrect for your strategy. And to get people interested in that is really going to be like pushing shit uphill. Sorry, swearing. But you can get people, but it'll be so hard. And then you'll think, oh, I just need to market it more. And then finally someone will get interested, and then you're like, oh, my hard work is paying off. I'll market some more. And then that person pulls out. It's just, yeah. So there certainly needs to be that invitation. Yeah. So it goes hand in hand with what we're saying, this thread of conversation here. This discoverability goes hand in hand with, again, we've kind of touched on this, but sharing your opinion, sharing your point of view. So one of the questions that I want you to ask yourself right now is, and Steph, maybe you could type this in the chat for me, because I'd be interested to see what people say. Do people know how you think? Okay, not any people. Okay, do your intended audience know how you think? Right? Just do a yes or no. And when I say, do they know how you think? I mean, you can be providing information, right, about whatever, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're sharing your point of view. It doesn't mean anything, really. Do you know what I mean? Ideally, you combine the two ideas, but like, do people know how you think? I've got to say, in my case, that the number one reason people decide to work with me is not due to any results that I say that I will, whatever. It's because of how I think, right? So I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. It can be just a simple yes or no, or you can put a little bit more detail. Do people know? Do your people know how you think? Vera says, no, not publicly. I can see where I've been holding back. Yeah. And yeah, we'll talk about that, because there's obviously very valid reasons we might want to hold back. Karen, can you provide an example? Is it how you think or what you think? It's kind of both. Okay. So people would know, in my case, that, yeah, Dani doesn't believe in, or yeah, she doesn't do the approach of webinars, 5-day challenges, opt-ins, or any of the conventional marketing. Like she's against that. And and I know why. I've got a basic idea why. Do you know what I mean? So that's a combination of the how. Is it how or what? Do you know what I mean? Does that help, Karen? Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of things, and this comes into messaging. You know, there's a whole bunch of things around my messaging about, you know, growing by slowing. And, you know, I have a whole story about how when I slowed down, that was the only time when I made any progress in my business, right? So Fiona says, yes, I think so. There are even topics not linked to my business that I write on because it felt right. Yeah. And I guess this is another thing, like I give myself permission to talk about whatever I freaking want, right? I never sit there and go, hold on, is this on brand? And is this the right thing? Do I have to change my website before I mention that? And what about that? No, like I don't freaking care. Do you know what I mean? I just don't care about those things. It's like, if I want to say something, I'm just going to say it. And I think this is where people get so stuck. They think they're stuck, but actually they're not, because I've had conversations to people and we've drilled down, and I'm like, well, you know, I've discovered that they want to do it another way. It's just they're trying to make them fit inside this mold, right? Let me just touch on quickly, does anyone feel a bit hesitant to actually share their point of view, or to say something against or that's contrary to their industry? Has anyone ever felt that? Do you want to like shake your head, move your head one way or another, just to give me an indication? Okay, yeah, cool. So what I wanted to say is, when I share my point of view, my perspective, and the other thing is, sometimes point of view is too harsh for people. They're like, oh, you know, so you might just want to use the word, share your perspective, share your thoughts, whatever word, you know, you need to give it. So whenever I'm doing that, there's always a little story behind it, right? So inevitably what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking people through a little epiphany, the same epiphany that I had through my story. And so I come to this conclusion of, and that, you know, they can see why I think so starkly different about something that maybe a lot of people think the opposite. Now, the thing is, the reason why we can initially not want to share, like not really want to, say something in public, is because the fear that people are going to come and shoot us down, right? They're going to like create some kind of conflict or whatever. And so what I want to say to that is, if you look around you, never in our whole life has it been so detrimental, if that's the word, to say that anyone is wrong about anything. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, everyone's right. Like, you cannot shame anyone about anything these days. Do you get what I'm saying? So keep that in mind. When it's your own story in this world that we're living in, think about it. Can anyone really come and say your experience is wrong? Can they? They can't. They absolutely can't, because especially in this world that we're in, they are the ones that will end up somehow being shamed by someone else. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't do that these days. You just can't. Right? So anyway, I hope that helps somewhat. You guys think, yeah, that's so true. Like your experience cannot be wrong. It just can't. So, I would just say, I mean, most of our experience aren't deep and dark or whatever, but, there can be a bit of nervousness, even the moment something's a little bit out of the ordinary. So, yeah. Yeah, Stephanie.
I want to encourage people to, now it's not a rule that you have to feel vulnerable about what you share. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Mostly I don't these days, because I don't care. I'm like, I'm doing this for me. I want to share this. I mean, there's a little part that I'm hoping that people will respond to it, that I'm hoping that it will connect with someone, but I just do things self-indulgently, and that feels much cleaner. But I want to encourage you that this is something we want you to ponder at some point too. Like, what is it that you'd really love to share? Especially as a projector, you are seeing things in your life. I was just talking to someone who's a projector in human design the other day, and she said, oh, I see these things for people and they don't listen. They just don't listen to me. I want to tell them if they'd only listen, right? Now, you need to be invited for a one-on-one communication that way for it to be received. Otherwise, it's going to feel like hitting a brick wall, and it feels pretty awful. And I have been there many times. But you don't need permission to share content. You don't need permission to share that message. You don't need permission to share what it is you're seeing. And if there was a message that you could deliver to the world, but to your special people in particular, the ones you'd most want to help, they're probably people that you know in your life. They might be your clients, they might be your loved ones. Share it. What would that be? Just notice what it is. You can feel vulnerable about it and share anyway. You can feel scared and to receive it. It's also for the people who bump up against it and it troubles them. It's probably not for the people it's neutral for. And share what is yours to share. And it's so simple. And the more you can drop all the thinking about stuff that's not your business and is outside of your control, like how that is received, the more you start. So beautiful. You have to get in the game. You need to get your hands messy with this marketing and human design stuff. You need mentoring and doing things you can get so the world can actually show you and invite you, but they need to see you. But it's as simple as being you. There's one other thing that came to me as Dani was talking, and that's like, we talk a lot about, both of us are writers and content creators and teachers, right? So content is easy. But even if you're not, there's a way to do this. There's a way to be discoverable and to share what you see, share your point of view, share who you are, without doing writing and online content creating, which I do highly recommend. And that's in communities. So if there's a group that you love get involved and take a position where you get to actually do stuff and people get to see you do stuff. So whether that's being an ambassador of a group or joining a board or running an event or being a speaker, all of those things are ways for you to just shine your beautiful light and share how it looks to you. And that's being discoverable. There's nothing pushy about that. And when you do that and it's clean and you're following those inner nudges, the invitations will come. I do promise you. You know, I couldn't have said this 3 years ago when I was struggling myself in like wrestling with what this means. But if you experiment with doing less, Dani can tell you that too. Other people here, slowing down, doing less. It's scary at first because of the thinking we have about it, but that thing that animates you always, that guidance you always have, you'll be able to hear it and you'll follow it and things will come. The path will open. It will, because this is how we're made. This is how we're made to be. So test it.
Because I've put in the chat there, what have you been holding back on sharing about? And would love to hear anything from you if you feel so inclined. Steph, I was just thinking I might just share this little story I have about one of my clients, projector clients. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to share, but I just felt after that to maybe open it up a little bit more to just talk about whatever is most important for you guys here. Octavia, I see your question there, so we'll get to that. So I'll go ahead and share my thing, Stephanie, and then if there's anything else you want to make sure we get in there. We do have a whole section about self-care as well, and about actually let me just I'll tell you about that in a moment, just in case you've got any questions about that. Okay, so the story I wanted to share with you is one of my projector clients. So what happened is I'd written this just a Facebook post about visibility. And this is well, it was probably about 2 years ago now. And it was interesting because at the time, there was just something I wasn't getting about what people were saying about visibility. Because I'm like, it just seems so broad. Like visibility for some people is showing their face, and visibility for other people is just something way huger than that. And just seemed to be like this huge spectrum. And I realized, oh, there's these 3 levels of visibility. And I just sort of had this message come through, and, you know, I created this post, and it went very well. And people were really appreciative how I broke it down. It was so easy to do. Anyway, a couple of months later, one of my clients, she wrote something on visibility, and I was reading her thing, and she had like, she kind of had these 5 or 6 key points, and I was looking at that and I'm like, that's freaking cool. And I thought she's come at this from a different angle to me, and yet the 2 ideas, you know, complement each other. And in the first instance, I said, Aisha's her name. I said, Aisha, this blog, this is a class. You could run a class on this. Like you've basically got your class outline right here. And then later on, I'm like, hey, why don't we do a class together? So that's what we ended up doing. And oh my God, the easiest class to sell in the world was this particular class I did with her. And so then what, oh yeah, okay. So the other thing I wanted to share, sometime later, like maybe a year later, Aisha was in one of my groups and we were talking about this projector stuff. And she was like, I don't really get, it was, you know, it was about the invitation and creating stuff with the invitation and all that. And she kind of put me on the spot a little bit. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to answer this? And I'm like, well, let's see, Aisha. Okay, so I invited you to do this this visibility workshop, and actually later on I invited her to do something else, to talk on a particular topic. And I said, so you've got a standing invitation there from me. We did that thing, but the invitation is still there, it still exists. Have you then created something of your own based on those invitations back then? And she's like, no, never thought of it. So do you know what I mean? Like, so think about, have you been invited to speak? You know, like think about what's happened in the past. And, you know, there might be some things that you can already create right now because you had that invitation, either direct or indirect. Yeah. Stephanie.
Yeah, I have gotten better as I pay attention to this, of noticing the energy of invitation. And sometimes it looks like I share something, whether it be a piece that I write on my blog, something in an email, and someone comments on it, or they message me and say, thank you for that. They're recognizing me. There is often, not always, but often there's an invitation inherent in that. So you will see me. I throw invitations out there all the time. Because you're a projector, you're not only designed to receive invitations. Now, your strategy for moving is to wait for the invitation, but you're also designed to give them. You're really good at it. So if you're creating something like this piece of content that we've been talking about, this thing that you're sharing, at the end of it, you can include an invitation. If you would like more, I have this beautiful thing. There's nothing pushy about that at all. You can issue invitations. In fact, I love that wording, as opposed to offers and promoting. Invitation is beautiful. It's something that people can say yes or no to. It's something that they can self-select. So you can feel the invitation in these things. When I started sharing about some of the topics I talked about earlier, unmarketing and no social media, I knew there was an invitation in it. And in fact, there were people like responding and wanting more of it. But if I hadn't shared that initial stuff, I never would have seen that. And now I am creating more and more things around that in response. I never create anything in isolation, personally. I will like recruit a group of people, my focus group, and I'll say, I'm thinking about creating this thing. Who wants to help me? I'm going to give you freebies along the way, and you get to tell me what you think about it. And I wait for people to respond to my invitation for that. It's kind of like testing it along the way. Where am I really invited? Who are my people? Who's inviting me? You can test. That's one of the best ways to get to know. If you're one-on-one with someone, it's pretty easy. You can say, I'm seeing something and I'd really love to share it with you. Is that okay? And notice what they say. Because I don't have 100% permission for everything. You know, when someone shows up for a conversation with me, they're definitely inviting me to share what I see. But sometimes there's an area that I want to check in. Let's just see. So I feel that I was a bit rambly in that, Dani, but there was some good stuff. Yeah. You want to sum that up for me?
Yeah, because it's funny. There was a thought that I had, and then I've totally lost it. And I'm like, what was it? Quick. And no, really, what I wanted to say is, what came to mind as you were talking is I just want to like reiterate that when you share, like without this agenda, when you share just what inspires you, what's interesting, it gets the cogs of your human design turning and working. And it's the thing that just sort of sets things in motion that allows invitations to come in. If you're sitting around wondering or thinking that you can't do anything, then probably not a lot's going to happen, because people need to come across you in some way. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So just go for it. Oh, there are all kinds of things too that I have put out there that didn't. They just went, but that's okay. I'm not attached to it. Like, all right, if I still want to do it, I'll keep doing it and find another way to do it that doesn't flop. But sometimes it's just, I'm playing. This is what I do. I play and experiment. You can too. It's a really fun way to create. Please go on, Dani. Sorry, I needed to get that out there. Good.
All right, so what I'd like to do is I just want to quickly summarize one of the sections that we were going to talk about, and I'm kind of going to gloss over it, mainly because I just want you guys to have an opportunity to speak, but some of you might have questions on some of this, so let me just quickly go through. So the stuff on self-care, like business owner self-care as a projector, like some of the points we were going to talk about is stopping before you're tired, the penetrating energy built for one-on-one and singular focus. What else? Outsourcing, managing teams, offerings, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview. So now I just want to go back. I think Octavia's is the first question I saw here. If anyone sees that there were ones further up, please let me know. But yeah, Octavia, you were saying, how could you tell that your blog was performing? What stats did you look at? Yeah, great question. So in my case, I was using the Squarespace Analytics app, and it's just such a cool app. Like if it, honestly, if that app didn't exist, I think my future would be different like than it is right now, because I honestly have like Google Analytics. I mean, I like the idea of it, but I find it so freaking difficult, you know. Whereas this app is just so simple, and really I just saw like what it summarizes is like, these are the top pages, the top hits for your pages. So I might see the first 4 and I'd have to expand it to see others. So really it was as simple as that for me, Octavia. It was just like, far out. Like that blog that I wrote, I don't know, was it a year ago? is getting, like, initially I remember the number 45. So I don't know, maybe it was 45 a month. I don't know, but whatever 45 is 45. One would be kind of, was a big deal. So do you know what I mean? Like 45, and then it kept going up and up. So does that answer your question, Octavia? Anything else you wanted to ask about that?
For those of us who don't have a Squarespace website,
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
stuck with Google Analytics, which sucks.
Yeah. Where are you? Your WordPress? Are you, Octavia?
Yes, I have WordPress, and I'm starting to use Kartra, and I have no idea how those analytics play together.
Yeah. So does anyone have any suggestions for anything that's easier than Google Analytics? Anyone here at all? How do you track? Just jump in and unmute if you... Come on, there must be something, guys. Doesn't WordPress have their own analytics app?
You know, Google Analytics isn't that tricky to know just your basics. So like, and maybe this could be an invitation for me to show how you can very quickly, there are really 3 things I look at on my Google Analytics. That's it. And it's like, here, bam. Dani, you had also mentioned to me the Google Console to set up, to sign up for Google Console. If you have Google Analytics on your website, Google Console will send you little updates of rising traffic and topics that people are finding your website with. So that's very simple. You don't have to go into the analytics to look at that. So that's another thing. But don't let it dissuade you. You can do it simply.
Yeah, Octavia, I'm pretty sure that you are set up with Google Console, right? Google Search Console. Does that sound familiar to you?
I just never look at that stuff. I might be, you know.
But I tell you what, because I just remember in Masterheart, like going through that a few times. So the thing is, I don't look at it at all, right? I don't even go there. I signed up once, and I get an email once a month, and it just gives me a summary. And yeah, like I forgot about that. Thanks, Stephanie. So that's the other way. Like if you, for anyone, I would just mark that down, like sign up for Google Console. Don't worry, you don't have to go back in there again. They'll send you an email. They'll give you a summary. It's been so helpful. It shows me like, these are your like, I forget how they put it, like, but the kind of the rising stars of search terms that people are finding you know, and these are the pages that are increasing, like they're getting more and more traffic, and so interesting. So like one thing I learned just recently was that like I wrote this blog about like live streaming to Zoom or through Zoom to your Facebook group or Facebook page. Is that, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, so when I had a group, when I was doing the live calls, so instead of like uploading and downloading recordings and everything, I was just, you know, live streaming. And it can be a little bit tricky with Zoom, and not a lot of people knew that you could do that on the basic plan. It used to be that you could only do it on the higher plan. So I wrote a blog about it, and I'm getting all this traffic. And so again, I'm back in this like, what can I do here? You know, so I've actually linked one of my tiny courses in that page about doing live classes or something or other. So I'll see how it goes. But yeah, it can be really informative. Yeah. Let me just check. Okay, so Karen says, what about when people are asking you to teach classes on things that no longer interest you? Right, where's Karen? There she is. Karen. What do you imagine Stephanie or I would say to that after what we've spoken about so far? I want you to unmute. Tell us.
Yes.
Yes, what?
You would say no, don't do it.
Why?
Because my energy isn't in it. I would be doing it for someone else, and I would be doing it in the hopes of making money doing it.
Exactly, yeah.
And so that's not in alignment with me or my energy.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. And thanks for letting me have a bit of fun with you, because this pops up, right? It's a no. It's a no. But it's so easy to fall into that trap, you know. So yeah. Can I repeat the name of the app? Was that the Squarespace app, Fiona?
Yeah, sorry, it was somebody else answered it in the chat then. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Stephanie, I was interested because I'm also a 6'2" and I'm an emotional projector as well. So I was particularly interested in your profile. But I was just wondering, obviously, Dani talked about some specifics earlier about like as a generator, she does this, this, and this. From a marketing perspective, would you say you only put your thoughts out into the world and then just wait for it to come back to you in whatever way? Or are you more, I suppose, do you have a little bit more of a concrete plan?
Concrete plan and me? Oh my goodness. But this is part of a larger experiment in really letting go and surrendering to life. I just wrote about this weekend, and I'm seeing that, wow, when I go with what's happening me, and I know it's a funny way to say it, but when I am alive with what is interesting to me and what I'm moved to share, I may have an intention for something. I may put something out there with an intention of inviting people in to work with me. It might not work, but when I'm sharing from that aliveness, it doesn't come from here where I think it was going to come from. It comes from over here. It's like the flow of life. So, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with having plans and strategies. I think they are beautiful when they are led from that thing that's alive in you. Like for Dani, oh my goodness, can you just see how she lights up when she's like a little detective following the things, and what if I plug this into this? I wonder if I will be more discoverable in that. Like discoverability is an adventure for her. How fun. It's inevitable that she's going to stumble on some really amazing things. It looks different for me. I love like running these public experiments. Like, I'm going to do this for 30 days. Who wants to see what happens? Stephanie's going to leave social media without a plan. Will she survive? Oh my God, will her business disappear? Like that kind of thing really lights me up. So I would say like start noticing what lights you up and give yourself permission in it. And I'm not sure if I answered your question, Fiona, directly, but experimentation is a big part of the 6th line, and also roll in your own way, like doing you, which is role modeling something that may be quite different.
No, you've answered perfectly, because you've basically told me what I do, and I just wanted you to confirm that. So in the last year, just to share my experience, I gave up planning a year ago. And if I decide to write about something, I now just write about it. And that's the stuff I get the most feedback on, rather than what I was planning about before. And it's the intersection of my life and whatever I'm thinking about. So
yes,
I still have the odd wobble where I'm like, should I have a bigger plan than this? Like, you know, so I feel much more comfortable that you've told me no.
Yeah. You know, don't have a plan unless your knowing tells you have a plan now. That's my call.
Clara, let's hear from you. Do you have any questions, any thoughts? No? Should I move on?
Not in particular, more just kind of Yeah, sort of in a probably going through a bit of a drained and depleted time, just trying to take in, hoping to recover some sense of inspiration, so that I don't feel like having a specific question, but just everything feels like a little bit, yeah, appealing in theory, but kind of not knowing really where to start in practice. So yeah.
So is there, what would be the most interesting idea that we've talked about that you could possibly kind of go away and play with?
I think that the concept that keeps attracting me back to sort of explore this, this design is to keeping having the sense that that there's an urgency to push and to have to do something in a feeling that is going kind of against my kind of natural setup. At the same time, so all of about that, what you said before about the leaning back or the slowing down. I was curious a bit about the segment on self-care, I admit, because somehow I feel like almost a shifting and reprioritizing more around that to be what appeals to me, but I then kind of tend to get lost as to how to do that. Does it make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah. And one thing I just feel to say to you, Clara, and probably to everyone, if you've never heard of me say this before, have tunnel vision, right? Be like this. Don't look at what your peers are doing. Stay in your own lane and do what feels good to you. These are distractions that take us off path and take us away from our own authenticity, and just create a lot of stress. Even for me, it's like, I honestly don't see any coaches stuff now, none. And I'm just in this blissful bubble, this blissful Dani creation bubble. I don't know what people, because when I was seeing other people talk about similar things, I was just like, I can't talk about that now. Just all these stories had come on, and and it's like, but if I never knew about that, I'd be just still blissful, So I just felt to say that. And if there's any particular question you're thinking about self-care, you feel free to ask, but we will provide some information on that anyway. I think Steffi and I work out a way to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that's a really important basis. So let's hear from a few others. Karen, did you have anything that you would like to say or ask?
Me, Karen?
Oh yes, sorry. Sorry, guys. Sorry. And I didn't look at the other Karen, so I'm just like going, is she having trouble finding the mute button, or so yeah, yes, you Karen Harvin, and then we'll ask Karen Dawes.
I was asking about your 2-4 profile and just how that might influence you, and coincidentally the other Karen's a 2-4 as well. So from
So fascinating. I have found that the 2-4 aspect of knowing about that has been the most helpful in informing me around marketing, like unbelievably so, whereas my strategy is informing more about creation, like what I create or don't create. So I guess what I will say is that my own epiphany came when I was very invested in this idea, because I didn't want to be in Facebook groups anymore, or just mainly it was Facebook groups. And I just felt like, how else am I going to do this? Because Facebook groups have been going really well, but I had to freaking work at it. And so I'm like, I know, I'll spend thousands on Facebook ads. That's what I'll do. And I'll have clients pop up the other side. And I was very, willing to do that. And then I just remembered something about reading something about my design. I didn't even know the correct terminology then. And I went back and I found that the 2-4 thing, and I'm like, oh my God. The first thing that came to me is I'm like, that whole strategy about me pouring money into Facebook ads to reach cold audiences pretty much goes right against my strategy, because the 4 is very much there's got to be some sort of connection between you and that person. So whether it's another person or whether it's an idea, or, it can't be like this, you and then someone way over there, or do you know what I mean? I just realized it wasn't going to work. So a lot of how I base my business now is like the 4 is this kind of thing is really cool for me, like casual, social, it's not too serious. So that needs to be an important part of what I do. And the 2, I don't know, I usually have a lot to say. I did make a video on this recently and now I'm going a bit blank, but I guess the 2, that I'm very aware of my hermit side, my introvert side. So I need to pull back. And that's just when I get in my creative bubble and I just do stuff and then I come back. And, but I think the key, that the offers that I've had that have felt like the most work were that they were too serious, So that's probably, all I can think to say right now. Karen Dawes, let's hear from you. Any questions, any thoughts?
So I really enjoyed hearing about you talk about the 4. I'm a 1-4 splenic projector. And so that was just very helpful. And I think learning about, interestingly enough, there wasn't anything particularly new for me, but it's just good to hear it spoken about, because I do keep falling into the trap of the hustle instead of just resting. And I'm not doing nothing, but just that balance. And so it's so good just to keep hearing that, because it's so counterintuitive to the world in which we live. So, and
I think it's also like, I just find this idea of slowing down, it's also about just when you do stuff, you're doing the right stuff. You're channeling your energy into the right stuff.
And it's so much more effortless. And you can do it less of the time as well, because you're in that zone.
And so that's where, I consider discoverability the right stuff for me. And I think for many projectors, because it means, again, going back to people can find you while you're resting, All right, so we're nearly at time. So we will kind of start wrapping up. Stephanie, anything you want to say at this time?
Yeah, there is. I want to tell you to sit with all of this that you've heard today and let it be light with you, and, sit as long as you need. If you feel a little stirred up, that's actually really good. The confusion place, the stirred up place, is a sign that things are kind of moving around and you're making new connections, and it may not all make sense right away, and it's supposed to be that way. Allow it to come to you. And as things settle, just ask yourself, what one thing would you like to experiment with from this today? What would you like to start becoming a little more aware of and noticing? So perhaps it's like, what if I hustle a little less? Give yourself time to hustle. If you still feel like you want to hustle, do it. But take a day and say, today, stepping away from the hustle totally, and just notice what happens, for example. But come up with some way for yourself to sort of, like a little project or something you want to evaluate or place your attention on. The concept of discoverability, feels much better than visibility, right? Like being visible, right? Oh, how could I let myself be more easily discovered? It means you've got to have something for people to discover. So what would I like for people to discover? Start with something very small and let it be light, and just start engaging with it. And you can send questions to me. I'm not going to volunteer Dani on that, but I love questions, because I will turn around and make them into content. And that's a win for me. I would be happy to hear that too.
Beautiful. And I love how you just said, you know, to ask that question, how could I be more discoverable? Because there's surely many ways. It doesn't have to look like anyone else, you know, but if you keep asking that question. And I just felt to leave you with two quotes that have really helped me in terms of, if we talk about this idea of the hustle and stepping back from the hustle. One of them is, when you fight life, life always wins. Now, the meaning of this, I don't know whether you can get the meaning of this immediately, but it's like, to me, life doesn't freaking want you to hustle. Life, that's not life's plan for you, right? But if you do the hustle, life's going to win. And guess how life will win? It will make sure that you end up resting. It will make sure that you end up on your back. You know, there's kind of like a, you know, like a negative, you know, an ouchy side to that. But, you know, I like it. You know, it's just like, don't fight life, you know. The other quote that's really, really helpful is, start the way you mean to continue. So if you're doing anything right now that you think, I gotta do, and it's gotta go faster and longer, you know, quicker and, you know, is that the way you want to continue? Or are you deluding yourself going, I'm just doing this for now because I just want to get ahead, and I just, it won't happen, really, because the energy that you step forward in is what you perpetuate. So I guess start the way you mean to continue, carry on. I find it helpful. All right, lovelies. Thank you for coming and spending time with us on this. I will be sending you out the recording, and Stephanie and I'll have a chat about some of that self-care and how we can communicate that. We might do a video or something or other. And yeah, you're welcome to, you know, if there are any kind of other things that you would like to know about, this will actually help us. You know, this might become more of a formal something, you know, class or course or something. And, you know, this is the first time we've come together to do this. So anything that you want to ask will certainly help in the development of this. And it will help you, of course, because we'll get back to you. All right. Oh, we'll sign off. Thank you very much for being here, everyone. And I hope to see your face turn up again somewhere soon. Bye-bye.